What is happening, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast, where we are here to help you be happy, healthy, wealthy, and get better every single day. And this episode absolutely is going to do that. The gentleman you're going to hear from, he's done some really inspiring stuff. He continues to do it and doing it all through facing adversity and yet getting up time and time again. Dr. Lincoln Harris is the founder and CEO of Ripe Global, the fastest growing career and education company in dentistry. He started a practice in a small town in Australia in 2000 and wanted his patients to have as good dentistry as anywhere in the world. This led him to seek the best education all over the world. In 2018, he started to think there must be a better way. And in 2020, along with his brother, revolutionized how dental courses were delivered using simulation, analytics, community, and resources on a global platform. Well, I'm blessed and honored to have you on the show, coming all the way in from Australia. How you doing, Lincoln?
I'm doing very well, JM, and thank you very much for having me.
Brother, it's truly my pleasure. And this is probably one of my favorite things about podcasts. And I'm curious if this is how you chose to, come up with Ripe Global. I was asking you off air, you're over in Australia. We're half a world apart or even more than that. But we get to do a show just like this, talking. I love this about podcasting, but specific to you, because you said in 2018, you're like, man, come on, there's got to be a better way than me traveling all over to learn how to do the best world of dentistry. Has it really shaped? How's that gone for you, man? It sounds like you guys are doing some amazing things.
Yeah, I mean, actually it was Dentaltown that started me. If you go way back, I was running conferences at Whistler in British Columbia, then Vale, and then Tuscany, and this is 2006, 2010. And just to help market those, someone said, "There's this website called Dentaltown. You should get on there." And so I went on there, and there was these people doing crazy stuff like soft tissue grafts, and actually a guy called Danny Melker who is in Florida, and Howard Chaslin, a prosthodontist there. And so in the process of trying to sell a ski conference, I started getting exposed to this wider world of prosthodontic dentistry that general dentists were doing. And so what ended up happening was, first of all, I started flying to the States. I think 2008, I went across the Pacific, I think 8 times in 1 year. And back then I used to fly economy too. So that's like your Marines boot camp of dental education. So actually I used to think about World War II every time I flew over the Pacific and go, oh, there used to be poor little guys down there in ships, So, and then the offshoot of that, all of that going backwards and forwards, is my practice grew like crazy. And I'm in a rural part of Queensland, Australia. There is literally no specialist here except an orthodontist, because I don't know if this will offend orthodontists. They're a bit like Chinese restaurants. Like, it doesn't matter where you go in the world. It could be the smallest town in the middle of nowhere, and there's always an orthodontist. But there's no other specialists, and so I had to learn all those specialty things, like a lot of perio surgery and a lot of multidisciplinary dentistry way back in 2006 to 2010. Came to Florida quite a few times there. So that led to that. And then people started asking me where I learned things. So I used to tell them all the big list of courses I'd done. And then at some point I thought, what the heck? Maybe I should teach it. So there's a bit of a tough story in between there. So the ski conferences were a financial disaster. Absolute. Like, I thought, who could resist going to a ski resort to get some education and getting a tax write-off? A lot of people, it turns out. And so my first year I lost $100,000 on it. I thought, right, okay, well, that's just my learning experience. And then the next year I lost a bit less. And then I broke even in 2008. And do you know what else broke in 2008? The entire global financial system, and American dentists in particular were feeling quite gloomy. And then it basically went down a hill again. So in 2010, I said, I'm never teaching again. Quit. Actually, I think I sold my house to pay for it all. So that was the end of that. And I said, I'm never teaching again. And I stuck to that. My practice boomed like crazy. And then you're in Florida, so you know about hurricanes. So 2013, we call them cyclones here. A big cyclone came down. It was about 120 miles across, and it turned into a tropical depression right over our area. So came in over the coast and then just parked there for 2 days, dropped 30 inches of rain across the entire area in 2 days,
Wow.
and then went away. And we had this beautiful sunny day, and the river came up, and it was the worst flood in history. Didn't affect any of my stuff, like it didn't affect my practice or my house or anything like that. Parents' business got flooded, and it's like creepy because when it got flooded, it was this beautiful, clear, sunny day, not a cloud in the sky, no wind, birds chirping, and just this mirror finish water slowly creeping up through the town. And it also affected, so I pull patients from about 120 miles in all directions because I've done marketing for a long time. So I started like TV back in 2007, but every single town for 2 to 3 hours drive was flooded. And so the local economy got destroyed. My practice collapsed 50% overnight, and I was in the middle of a big house build. And so then I thought, this won't last long. I can overcome this adversity. I will do extra marketing, and I'm a hot business person, so I can overcome anything. And so then I doubled down and bought a big chunk of real estate from a developer who was going broke right on the coast. You know, it was like a farm with subdivision on 3 sides. So I doubled down, bought that, borrowed extra. I borrowed to like the max, and then my practice didn't actually recover. So, you know, it took about 4 years to recover. So that was like when you're selling your third car to pay payroll, then, you know, life's pretty tight. So at one point I'm sitting there going, if I don't do something, I'm going to have to sell the rest of my real estate below loan value. And that's, you know, not so fun. And so I put this course up, and I was on a forum called DPR. It's a Australian-based Facebook forum for dentists. Back then there was like 1,000 people in it. And so I put up this post and I said, hey, I'm going to do a treatment planning boot camp, but real world. Like you've actually got to talk about money, because back then most treatment planning, it was always, you know, let's talk about occlusion. And when you fix the occlusion, everything in their life gets better. You know, when you fix their occlusion, you fix their marriage, and you fix their neck posture, and you fix their bank balance, and their caries goes away. Like I'd been to one of those occlusion courses where, you know, world peace broke out once you got CR in the right spot. And sorry, I'm slightly sarcastic sometimes, so you can edit. So anyway, I put this course up and said it's going to be real world. We're going to treatment plan, but we're going to treatment plan really fast. You've got 5 minutes, no matter how complicated. We're going to smash them out one after the other, and you have to talk about money and also how you communicate this. And the course sold out overnight, so it's like $40,000 up front. I thought, actually, that's not a bad business model. So I did that again. So I sold $80,000 worth of treatment planning sort of in about 4 days, you know, cash up front, 9 months in advance. And that is what got me back into teaching. But I would not have done that if I was comfortable, because I was so afraid. After 5 years of failing conferences, I was so afraid to put something up and fail publicly. I would never have done it if the fear of not doing it was not worse than the fear of, you know, doing it. So that's when I look back now, I call the failed conference business like my MBA. Like I learned to project education. We ran education in about 10 different countries. About 5 different countries at that point. So I got just used to projecting education internationally, even though it wasn't financially successful. And then the flood gave me the kick to get back into teaching, because I wouldn't have done it. And then that was all going beautifully. The teaching business, it was actually like required negative capital because, you know, dentists were paying up front. So the business just grew off pre-sales. It was growing 30-40% a year just with basically a side hustle. And then within 4 years, it was bigger than the practice. And we were running like hands-on training in London, Croatia, Germany, States, New Zealand, Singapore, India, I think. I can't remember. A lot of places. And then the practice was going really well. So life was sweet. 2019, everything's going great. And 2018, I was starting to get tired of flying. And I thought, there must be a better way. Like, a lot of people want me to teach, and I can't be everywhere all at once. But I didn't have time. I went and looked at office space in Prague. I was going to think maybe I'll have a training facility in Prague and Denver and, Australia, and traditional bricks and mortar training facilities. I just didn't have time. And I didn't want to. I was too comfortable. And then March 2020, I had time. So, yeah. So that was the build-up.
I mean, there's a couple things that are clearly themes that are coming out of this. You're not afraid of risk, which I freaking love. You're like, all right, we're going to, by the way, these people that didn't go to Whistler and Tuscany and Vail, or Aspen, it was one of the two that you said, it's like, come on, these are amazing places to go. Now, actually getting them to attend, that may be a challenge because I'd be on the slopes. I wouldn't actually be at the conference, but I'm not a dentist either. But let me ask you, the risks, because you mentioned the real estate purchase and then this crazy flood. Were you always open to risk, or is it by literally, well, I don't have much choice at this point? I'm just curious because often people won't pursue their dreams because they're so risk averse. That doesn't seem to be Lincoln's path.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things come out of it. It's a very interesting thing. So, like, when real estate is just take real estate. So my mum sold real estate for a couple of years. So I think when I was in grade 8 at high school, I used to listen to her. Back then it was motivational tapes. So you'd go to the sales conference and then they'd try and sell you their big book of motivational tapes, cassette tapes. So I used to drive to school with my mum listening to her, body language tapes and how to positive reinforcement tapes, all this sort of stuff. So before Tony Robbins. So that in the back of my mind, I kind of followed this, and you can't buy real estate, or you can't afford real estate when it's ready to be developed, mostly, like, unless you're already rich. So like when you look at a block of land, say some parcel that's close to the beach in Florida or something, and go, and you're seeing it get subdivided, and then it's just worth millions and millions. And you go, wow, who was it that bought that 20 years ago? And my parents have the old slides, before digital camera, you had slides and you put them in the carousel. They have slides of beach areas in Australia from their childhood, and they're like 6 fishing shacks. And now there's like 20-story apartment blocks looking like Miami. So not quite, okay. There's more people in Florida than in Australia, but you get the idea. You go from fishing shacks to high-rise apartments. So you sit there and go, actually, a lot of it is just time, and time takes away the risk. So if you take that particular piece of real estate that I bought, now it really hurt to buy that. Like I had to offload some other real estate, and I had to do a lot of tough things to make it work. But then I bought it for 700,000, and it just got appraised yesterday for 11 million. So I got it because everyone was uncomfortable, including me. When you've had a flood, the entire economy is destroyed and the developers are going broke. No one wants to buy stuff because, and I think I bought it for half of the list price at the time. So, so it's, I don't know, is that a big risk? It's hard to say. Like, for me, you just go, that's almost too good to pass up. Now, on that story, one of my mentors in my very early days of dental practice is a guy called Dan Daly. He's a pretty tough man. He owned pubs all his life. So, like, one of his bits of advice is you should always punch the other guy first and knock him out, and then call the police while he's unconscious and charge him with assault. So now I've never, to be fair, never used that advice because I don't own a pub. But he said, Link, what happens is, he said, everyone's standing at the platform, this big white train called Opportunity comes up to the platform, and all the doors open, and everyone looks at each other, and one man hops on and the door's shut. And as the train's leaving, everyone's going, maybe we should have got on that, So, I've had a few swings at things. I mean, the Whistler thing I thought was a sure thing, so I didn't see it as a risk, and I didn't realize it was risky until afterwards. So, look, and what's the worst that can happen? I don't know, your ego gets bruised. I mean, if you want to do stuff that hard, you want to do it earlier in life, because if it fails, you've got time to recover.
Yeah, one of the questions I want to get to, because being a performance and mindset coach, I think of mindset all the time, right? And you mentioned 2008, 9, 10. I mean, that was a solid string of about 2.5 years of getting our asses kicked. And then obviously we get into the pandemic in March of 2020 until whenever it went to, or still going on in some places of the world, for the love of God. But anyway, I'm curious your mindset. So you're getting just kind of kicked during these times. What does your mindset go to? And then we'll get into some of the course stuff that you did afterwards. But I want to get into the mindset because I love the analogy that you gave. And by the way, I'm originally from Montana. So the guy that talks about knocking the guy out and then getting him charged with assault, like that, these are my people. So that makes a ton of sense. But the analogy of the train showing up and one person hopping on board makes so much sense. I'm curious with your mindset, because you said, look, Whistler wasn't a risk. What does your mindset go to when you're facing this adversity? Because clearly you've gotten back up and continue to get back up. The 700,000 to $1 million, love it. But at some point, it wasn't that sunshine and rainbows. You talked about the third car to make payroll. I mean, these are some tough times. How do you face these adversities and continue to rise?
Well, my general advice is, first of all, just stop sleeping, because that's what most people do when they're stressed. And if you're going to cry, do it in the shower where no one can see. Okay. So, top tips. I think part of it is personality based. So to give you a bit of example, different members of my family are affected very differently. My parents went bankrupt when I was, I don't know, 10 or something. They were farmers during the 80s when interest rates were like 24%. So it affected different members. Like, there's members of my family who are absolutely paranoid about debt, any financial risk, live a very, very safe life. And because they were at an age where they were like working really hard, and it was just like, no matter what happens, life can just go wrong and you can't recover. But I was young enough that even when my parents were going bankrupt, I was having a great time. Like I learnt to drive a car when I was 6. I used to go hunting. Like we don't hunt deer because we don't have them. I mean, we don't really hunt here. Like, we cull stuff basically. Like, when we go and shoot kangaroos, it's just because there's too many and you've got to reduce the numbers, like you would with, what's that little dog wolf thing that you have, coyotes or something. Okay, so okay, half your listeners have been offended because they see kangaroos as like some cute thing, but like to us, when there's like 500 deer eating your garden, right? Okay, and you want to scare them off, it's a bit like that.
It's like boars in Texas, like they're overrunning the place, killing agriculture.
Yeah, like that. So I was 11. I was out hunting on my own. Actually, one time I was in we grew tomatoes on trellises, and I didn't realize that all the pickers were in the field because they were all bending over. And I saw this bird and I thought, I'll have a shot at that. And I think a lot of the people we were employing were from Vietnam, and they were had immigrated to get away from the war. So probably the sound of a rifle shot going over their heads was all a bit too soon. Anyway, they stood up very quickly, and I crouched down very quickly because I was quite embarrassed about having nearly shot over the top of people. And then I sort of crawled off through the sugarcane fields so that no one could see where this thing come from. So I had a great time as a kid. So my association with things going wrong financially is not a bad one. So, or maybe I've just got third child syndrome, where you just don't think you're enough. So maybe that's my suggestion. Be the third child in a 4-child family.
Not always easy to do, but it sounds like you don't take it too seriously. All right, brush myself off, get back up, and no matter what, you have a confidence about you that allows you to clearly say, all right, got my ass kicked with the Whistler thing. I'm going to get back going, build my practice up. Then a flood comes. All right, now I'm going to start a video that gets $40,000 like that, which, by the way, that's not the norm. So clearly you have an ability to take an idea and create it and monetize on it, which is fantastic. So talk to me about this. In 2020, you and your brother said, all right, we can do this a little bit better. We can revolutionize the way that this education. I don't have to fly to Prague and I think you said India and the States and all over Croatia. So what does it look like now, Lincoln? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so 2020, I was sitting there, my practice was shut. All of my courses, which I had about $1.8 million of pre-sales, and I'd run like one course in January 2020, and then the rest was cancelled in Australia. You couldn't basically fly across state lines for most of 2020, and 2021 was like, I don't know, nearly 2022 before you could fly anywhere. So even within Australia. So I'm sitting there with my team going, everything I've ever done is about to just go up and smoke. That wasn't actually true, but that's how I felt. And actually in the room I'm sitting in with this podcast, I was over in that corner over there with my team. And I basically said, we can sit here and suck our thumbs and cry about this and go home, or we can go big. So it's basically, at that point in time, I really only had two choices. One was to give up, and the other was to go big. And that's, that adversity thing, to make those decisions is really hard when you're comfortable, because it's a really uncomfortable decision to make, and there's risk. But you've also got risk of doing nothing. There's a lot of risk in life. We often don't think about the risk of not taking the opportunity. It might be that, our retirement's a bit miserable, okay? Or we have, huge healthcare costs and disability costs that we can't manage. And so there is actually risk. There's also risk with not taking opportunities, and that we often don't weigh that. We give it a zero weighting to the risk for doing nothing and a huge rating to the risk of trying to have something. So, but for me, I could see if I do nothing, I could lose everything anyway. So what the hell? So I did a little thing and said, look, I broke a number of laws. I didn't realize this till much later. So when you raise investment from people, there's actually a whole bunch of laws, particularly if you don't have an audited prospectus and you're not listed on the stock market. Okay, so you can't actually, there's a whole bunch of rules about soliciting investment at an early stage company. Thankfully, I had no idea about any of that. So I went on my Facebook group, which had about 70,000 people at the time, and said, hey, I'm going to do this new thing. If you want to invest, let me know. Send me a message about how much you're interested. And then my brother contacted me and goes, hey, can I invest? And then he kind of got involved. I had no idea of the legal process to set up a company just so that you can take investment, particularly if you don't want to get a massive tax bill when you exit, 10, 12 years later, or have a massive tax bill because you realize you built the wrong structure, and then you have to convert it all to a new structure, which is essentially a sale. And so then you have sales tax or something like this on the transaction. So anyway, so from March until May 2020, we basically paid lawyers, I think, to do 50 documents that it requires for all the stuff to take investment. And then we launched in May of 2020 with the vision to make education available everywhere without travel. So what our actual business plan was to have a whole video online like Netflix. So we went into that pretty much before anyone else. And then to have small training facilities everywhere. So not like big, Scottsdale style palaces, but actually just small, modest things where you focus on the training. You don't put any cost into glitz and glamour. You just want people to get well trained at a good price. So, and then by September, we realized it's not going to work. Who knows how long till people can travel? My brother calls me, says, what if people can never travel again? How would we teach? So from September to November 2020, we sat there and we did a workshop, and we said, how the hell do you teach a hands-on dental technique course without people being in the same room? So anyway, we went through a whole bunch of stuff. And then in that time, we built simulation kits, got them manufactured, built an entire new curriculum for training people that involves no one traveling, and the actual method for delivering that. Built a 2-year course, put it on sale, and we sold $1 million worth of education between November and January, and started our first course in January 21. I thought, wow, actually this has got legs. This has got potential. So we started raising capital. Like, what happens when you raise capital is everyone says there's just so much money in the world. Raising capital, it's easy. And this is just people who've never done it. Anyone who ever says raising capital is easy is either the 1 in 10 million people who are lucky, or mostly someone who's never done it. Because anyone who's ever done it says it's a grind. Like, you basically should expect to get rejected about 50 to 100 times. That's if your business is good. If your business is not good, then you continually get rejected. So we started raising capital mostly from dentists. It wasn't a lot in the start. It was maybe only 700,000 or 800,000 the first little bit. And then, we scaled up from there. We started with a restorative course. And the cool thing was, when we train people, they're training in their own dental office. They're using their own equipment, their own dental burrs, the same posture that they normally sit. Everything is familiar. And then when we give the feedback, we're forced to give the feedback in this really visual way, because you can't sit there and point. Turns out that pointing at some error that's 0.2 millimeters is not an effective way to train a dentist anyway, but drawing on a massive image is. So they actually learn faster and they implement way better. So it's like, if you're going to learn to fly a, Airbus A330, you should probably train in an A330 and not in a Cessna or something, just in the little up and down aeroplane at the shopping mall. So that's where it started. And then over time, we started building the software for the learning management system. You can't buy off-the-shelf software that does all the stuff we need. So most dentists who run courses have about 3 different platforms that they use, and that's annoying. So we built one integrated LMS, which I think I've got a bunch of dentists wanting to use it now for their own stuff because it does all 3 functions simultaneously. We built an algorithm to assess a dentist and give them a customized career pathway. And then we started building dashboards because we were talking to people who would employ 50 or 100 dentists, and training them at scale is really difficult, and keeping track of their training is difficult. So, and no one really provides that sort of software. So we started building that. And so what's actually happened is we started out thinking we were an education company, and over the last 3 or 4 years, we've morphed into we're more and more like we're a career company on the front end. So we help dentists' careers. And on the back end, we're a data simulation technology and machine learning company. So that's, and I've quit dentistry, so I'm not a dentist either anymore. Well, I still do a little bit, but I'm basically a full-time CEO now. So that wasn't in my career plan, that's for sure.
Yeah, you put on a new hat, man, and it's definitely a different one. So you're spending less time now in the air, we'll say, less time traveling somewhere, which would also hopefully mean spending less and hopefully making more. But this is not just for you. This is also for your consumer. Because one thing I know about dentists, again, I'm not a dentist as everyone knows, but being away from that chair, that's money out of my pocket. Lincoln, I can't afford to go do this training. And now you've created something that is available to them through the LMS, which I'm guessing you can't go forward unless you're literally passing these things. But it's got to be this is a big win-win, I'm guessing. So is that true? Being a CEO now, you're able to chill back in Australia and put the feet up and enjoy the Mai Tai on the beach, or are you still traveling, brother?
Okay, so my advice to your audience is, if you want to chill out and fly less, don't be a CEO. so I don't fly to teach as much, but I'm flying to the States in 2 days' time, and I've got 5 group practices I've got to see, and then I've got couple of guys in Palo Alto. They've got private equity VC funds, and then a couple of family offices in Dallas that I got to see, and one of my original investors I'll visit. So far, the not flying as much for me hasn't worked out. So I've seen more of the United States in the last year than I think I've seen. I went to Detroit. Like, I never had a reason to go to Detroit before. I went there, and I had what's amazing. I had the best Mexican restaurant I've ever been to in some suburb of Detroit, and it was the middle of winter, so you can imagine how bleak it was. So anyway, so I still travel a lot, so that bit didn't work out. But for our dentists, like, we train people in over 30 countries now, and it's like nearly 500 dentists that we've either trained or under training. So I think our restorative course is probably the biggest in the world now. And there's probably 4 trends really driving it hard. During COVID, people learnt to learn online. So that's one. And if you ask anyone in 10 years' time, will we do more learning online or less? Everyone answers the same. Then the second thing is that more and more, so in many parts of the world now, the percentage of dentists that graduate that are female is like 60 to 70%. And there are periods in life for female dentists where going to a course can be quite difficult. Now, you might say, well, that shouldn't be the case, but it is. So we have a lot of female dentists contact us either because they've got a young child and they don't, even if they could get someone, they're just not going to enjoy being away, with their child at home. So, and then, or their kids have gone to school and they've had sort of 2 or 3 years off, and they've been out of dentistry for a year or two, or doing very minimal hours, and they feel like they've lost their confidence, or they're falling back. So we get a lot of people, and sometimes in really like remote places too. Like, we had one dentist who's way up in northern Canada, and she said for her to go to Scottsdale was like nearly a day and a half travel, because she had to, like, small airport to a bigger one to Toronto, and then down to the States. So we had one lady from somewhere in the Caribbean. Like, there's just no dental courses available there. The other big trend is roll-ups of practices. So private equity firms are buying dental practice like crazy and putting 50 together, turning them into a DSO. And there are all sorts of like, people go, oh, DSOs, they're awful. Some of them are, that's for sure. Like, some of them are really just focused on the cheapest, nastiest dentistry ever. But they're all different sorts now. Like, there's high-end DSOs and there's low-end. It's like, even Gucci is basically a chain store now. So it's an expensive chain store, but still a chain store. So what happens is these non-dental owners buy them, and they don't know anything about dentistry. And then the EBITDA of their group starts dropping because they don't understand that the productivity of a DSO in dentistry is entirely driven by how productive the dentist is in the room that they're in. And so it's really about dollars per chair hour, not even so much dollars per clinician hour, because sometimes the clinician earns a lot, but they hop across 5 chairs. So that means that they're incredibly inefficient with the real estate footage. It's dollars per square foot, really. And so the difference between a well-trained dentist and a not well-trained dentist is often 3 or 4 or 5x. And so if you've got someone who's doing, $50,000 a month or less, that's basically below the break even for a dental practice in the United States. And then if they're doing like $100,000 or $150,000 a month in the same chair or the same square footage, obviously your operational costs are much the same. So your EBITDA goes through the roof. So what's happening now is we record all of the, like, for the dentists themselves. I mean, you went back to cost. It's never good to do something just to be cheaper. But if you could do something that's better and it's also cheaper, that's a good deal. So in the United States now, the big institutes are charging up to $85,000 to do a continuum. And then you have the travel, and then you have the loss of production. So you're probably looking $120,000 to $160,000 to do one of these courses from start to finish. And we can do ours for about 25,000 US. And there's hardly any downtime because you don't have to travel. And there's no travel costs and there's no hotels. You do miss out on the hangover that invariably happens when you go to a course, though. So,
I'm curious because one of the things that you have talked about without saying the word, especially when you put on that CEO hat, which most dentists that we're talking to, they are that CEO. They're that CEO of that practice. The word is vision. And I'm really curious, brother, because your brother asked you a great question, which is, what if no one can fly again? Which started to really shape, it sounds like, the vision of what you're doing at Ripe Global. Talk to me about the vision of Ripe Global and how often you're communicating that as the CEO, because I think this is applicable to any business owner. This is the one thing I coach on all the time. Your vision has to be so big that everyone inside your practice can fit their vision inside of it. Is that a true statement for you? And how do you go about really casting your vision to your team?
so I agree, visions are very underrated. And that's because mostly people don't know what a vision is. And they also don't know how hard they are to write. Like, anyone who thinks a vision's easy to come up with has just never done one. And invariably what happens, because I coach people a lot on visions too, even just my students with the vision of their career. And what invariably happens, you say, what's your vision? They tell you a strategy, not their vision. So what I've worked out is that in life, if you are smart and you're entrepreneurial, you will have more opportunities come your way than you can deal with. And you will end up doing two things that pull you in opposite directions at the same time. And so the purpose of your vision is not to get you somewhere, it's to get you there much, much faster, because you have this one benchmark or this yardstick that you measure all of your decisions against. And that makes you not get distracted and pulled off path. So that's the purpose of vision. And the second thing that I need a vision for is because it's hard. Like, building a business is hard. And so when you're sitting there in those low moments, and everyone has them, and if people don't have them, or they tell you that they don't have them and they give you a big shiny story about their business, they're just full of bullshit. You can bleep that out. And so so it's the curse of having Australians on your podcast.
Oh no, you're
not enough soap in their mouths when they were kids. My mum literally used to do that, scrub my mouth with soap. Didn't work. Anyway, so for me, the vision is incredibly important. And if you want to ever refine a vision, try pitching your company to investors when you want to raise like $3 million, or like next year I want to raise $20 or $30 million. And so, like, you have to be able to say what it is you want to be and where you want to go in one short, crisp sentence. And that's really hard to do. It's easy to say what you're going to do, but to actually say who you want to be or where you want to be. So for us, we accelerate careers for dentists globally. And that's actually our purpose, really. And then the vision is to use data, simulation technology, AI to provide all of the training, resources, and support and community that a dentist needs from graduation to retirement. Now, I had no idea about that when I started. Okay, and if you think about that statement, it's actually quite big. There's a lot of things that happen between graduation and retirement. So, and I think one thing that's really important with visions is you can refine it. So our vision when we started was to democratize education. It's kind of fluffy. I actually just copied it from someone else. I had no idea what it meant. And the process of pitching. So I've pitched 20 something times in the last 3 months to private equity firms that we're still too small for. It'll be like for our round day next year, to private investors, dentists, high net worth, family offices, VCs, pretty much everything, and pitching is probably the best thing for refining your vision, because you have a person who's completely unemotional about your business. And then getting back to the big thing, that is the hard bit, because having a big vision is really scary, because if you have a small one, it's really easy and you won't fail. If you have a big one, your chance of not meeting it is quite high. The cool thing is, if you don't meet a massive vision, it might still be a very big success. So, like, I don't make any bones about the fact that I want Ripe Global to be worth $2 billion in 7 years' time. And so, like, now, will I hit it? I don't know. Maybe I'll go way past. Maybe I won't. But let's have a big swing at that.
Yeah, one of the Richard Branson came into my head as you were talking, because you're talking about it having to be big enough, but it's got to be simple enough for Branson that if it fits on the beer coaster when you're talking to him at the bar, cool, he'll take you seriously. If it goes past that, not interested. It's too complex. So it is interesting how it's got to be big enough yet simple enough to explain that you can put it on the back of a beer coaster. God, I had a question that is just eluding me for a moment. You said something and I thought, gosh, everyone needs to hear this. You know what? I'm going to give you an open mic moment because I forgot my question.
You think about that thing. It'll come to you the
will.
moment we turn it off. You call me back on the cell phone. I'll give you my number. Go, hey, quick, turn the mic back on.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was so profound. It was world peace. We were literally going to create world peace. You know, the open mic moment, I'm sure, Lincoln, there's something I didn't know enough to ask you where you're like, I have to share this with the audience before we wrap up. What didn't I know enough to ask you that you're like, let's make sure that they get this?
Look, I mean, who is your audience? I don't. So Tony Feck said, go and talk to JM. He's a cool guy. He's like got a lot of energy. He's doing cool stuff. But because like that was last week, and I've been pitching all week and doing stuff. And so anyway, and then your team is on the ball, and like I got sent this invitation link really quick, and I actually didn't have time to look up who you were. And so, who is your audience?
Yeah, you have a bunch of business executives, you have entrepreneurs, and most recently, a lot of dentists that are looking to grow. They are looking for something that's going to support them. So the avatar would be the 25, maybe 30-year-old to about 55 years old. We're in growth mode. We want to get better.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, for those ones who are in the dental space, we have an entire software stack that is built and then we're building, which is designed for people who have many associate dentists, because it gets very difficult to mentor dentists at scale. And also when you have a big group, you don't want them all going away for the weekend all the time because it hits your production. So for those of you who are scaling a practice and you want to talk to the one company in the world that's literally built to help you do that thing with regards to the upskilling of dentists, because we understand the link between proper skills training and EBITDA. Like people get a bit shy about this and go, oh, I don't want to talk about that grubby money stuff while I'm talking about clinical. But if you don't get rewarded for your hard work, then you tend not to want to do it. Unrewarded altruism fades with time. So, if you are doing extra good work for your patients and you're not earning a lot more, at some point you go, why? And then you just kind of like slide off into cynicism and bitterness. So, so for people in that space, reach out, we'll help you. Like we've got a business designed for that. I mean, for other people, it's probably a lot of the people on your podcast who possibly more successful than me, probably are, a lot of them. It's like, if you're born in the United States, you just have no idea how big your market is because you just think it's normal. And you have to almost come from outside to go, holy, whatever word you want to put in next. Like it is, there is more business for me to do within 100 miles of Philadelphia than in my entire country. And the density of the business is something that you just take for granted. So like you guys just, there's just so much opportunity there. And I think if you're born there, you don't actually even understand it. So Like, actually, I once started a lecture with a story about America, which was, you know, America's just finished a big war. They're printing money. The economy's terrible. And obviously, this was actually the Civil War. After the Civil War, the United States had like recessions for about 30% of the years for the next 80 years. And they were bad, like down 20%. And the United States government was minting coins to pay all the soldiers because they had no money, because they just borrowed like, I think it was like $120 million from France to fight the war, the North against the South. And so the United States was like broke from fighting a war, and they were printing money to fund all the soldiers and all the expenses. And then people worked out they could also mint pennies. So then the currency collapsed and all the banks went broke and all of this. And so, one thing I can say to all your listeners who are Americans, like, don't bet against your own country. When you sit there, because I hear people going, oh, we're having too many wars and we're printing too much money and the economy's terrible, blah, blah, blah. And you go, dude, that's how you started your country. Like, you've been doing this for ever since you started. You seem to be doing okay. So, I think Americans underappreciate how amazing your country is because you're just used to it.
Yeah, it is an interesting perspective, and if you haven't lived in another country, you probably don't realize it. In all fairness, and you're absolutely correct. It's an abundant place. There's no doubt about it. Lincoln, this is ripped by. We've already been 46 minutes, brother. How can people find you? Because look, it sounds like Ripe Global is continuing to grow. It's going to in 7 years, whether it hits 2 billion or higher, who knows? You can support a lot of people. Where can they best connect with you online, connect with Ripe Global?
They can go to www.ripeglobal.com. Unless they're an investor, they can still go there and then scroll right to the bottom where it says invest, and then send me a message. I'll get you in before the round day, and when the prices of shares will be going up quite a bit. So, it's actually been really fun, JM. I really appreciate it. Right, those before we went online, I said, "What do your initials stand for?" And you told me what they stand for. And apparently, you only ever get called that when your mother's angry with you. So I'll continue to stick with JM. It's been a fun time. So
appreciate you.
I really
thank
enjoyed
you, bro.
it.
No, I did as well, and thank you for coming on. I mean, I love the episode. Look, we talked about hitting adversity, taking risks, having a vision. I mean, these are three major components of running a successful business. And everybody listening, for the most part, you are operating a successful business. I love what he had to say. Go look up Ripe Global. I wasn't familiar with it until Tony introduced us. I love what they're working on. I love the what he puts out there and says, this is my vision. We're going to go get it. Or we won't. But either way, we're going to do our damnedest. Make sure to share this with someone that you know is struggling with adversity, scared to take a risk, or just needs a little help, with that extra push. And until next time, remember, your mindset matters. I appreciate y'all. We'll talk soon.